Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Prasad Galapalli, who is founder and CEO of Trucker Tools. And today we're going to talk about smarter approaches to freight matching. Now, there's a lot of discussion today in the industry about, there being a capacity shortage in trucking. Finding trucks for available loads is more challenging than ever for, shippers and brokers. But the reality is that there's a lot of inefficiency in the traditional load matching process. So what are some of the challenges in the way load matching takes place today? How are advancements in technology, making the freight matching process more efficient and taking a smarter approach, if you will? And, what are some of the benefits that companies are achieving with this newer process? Those are just going to be some of the questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to welcome Prasad to the program to share some of his insights and perspective on this topic. So Prasad, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you, Adrian, for having me here. And it's an honor to share our thoughts from Trucker Tools viewpoint to the rest of the industry.
Great. So before we dive into the meat of the topic here, there's a lot to talk about. You're a first-time guest on Talking Logistics, and like I always do when I bring someone new in, I'm always curious how they got involved with this industry to begin with. So why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with this industry, and what your role and responsibilities are there at Trucker Tools.
So I got in transportation or supply chain management in early 2000s, primarily with shipping, and then in trucking space in freight matching primarily. It's with companies like Get Loaded, DAT, and after that I've started Trucker Tools. And so during my time with these companies, I've had the opportunity to really understand some of the problems that you have mentioned in freight matching, and that led me to find in another way to really pursue building a new mousetrap. And here we are with Trucker Tools many years after. We strongly believe that we have that mousetrap.
Great. Yeah. So, you've been in it since the early 2000s. Certainly, there's been a lot of ups and downs in the transportation industry and the trucking industry over that time period. And, here we are, we find ourselves in yet another snapshot in time where, like I said in my opening, comments, it's a capacity constrained market right now. And the ability to match freight, with available capacity is more challenging than ever. Why is that? Why are brokers and shippers having a hard time with finding capacity?
The first thing, before we understand the underlying problem, we need to peel out some of the layers to understand what's the existing process look like. If you look at the traditional brokerage today, they are making calls, in most cases about 30 to 60 calls to cover a load, to their scrambling this information from multiple sources such as load boards, emails, spreadsheets, phone calls. And what they're doing is they're handling a lot of stale information. So for example, you're a broker, you're calling a carrier. You probably saw this carrier on a load board. The carrier posted their availability probably a day earlier or a few hours earlier. Now, by the time you call the carrier is not available there. And that, we could take that as one specific example. But the underlying problem behind that is a lot of stale historical information, not real-time accurate information. Now, the second problem is even more profound than the first. So the second problem, when you look at a brokerage, the biggest thing that everybody is talking about is we need more carriers. So if you ask any broker, they have thousands of carriers that are qualified in their system, and over 90% of those carriers are one load wonders. So what I mean by one load wonder is a carrier picks up a load for a broker, delivers the load, and once they deliver the load, they fall off of the radar of the broker. So broker has no idea when this carrier is available in future for any of his loads. So you put a lot of time and energy in qualifying these carriers, and you could only get one load out of that. And if you look at 90% of these carriers being one load wonders, that's a huge expense. And a good example or a parallel that I can draw about is, if you're bleeding on one hand, you're hemorrhaging blood, and all you're doing is putting more blood in your body to fight that. We all know that's not an efficient solution. So these two problems together drive most of the inefficiencies in a broker in a brokerage world today. The third one is, which is kind of tied to the first one, is 80% of freight today is moved by small carriers. Small carriers, especially 20 trucks or less. And these carriers are less adapted to new technology, or any technology for that matter. And hence, they actually drive a lot of lack of information or stale information, which is driving the cost of a brokerage. And as we know, most of the brokerages have over $150 as a transaction cost.
Those are all great points. I mean, I know when I've been talking to brokers, they kind of relay similar information. I mean, I love that phrase, one load wonders. But that's something that I've heard a lot as well. They broker a load to a carrier, but they don't have another load for that carrier at the destination point, or they don't know what that carrier is going to do, what their availability is after that. So historically, there's just a lot of poor visibility there. And then to your point, some of the visibility that they have is actually outdated information, right? By the time they go around to making that phone call or sending that text or email, that carrier is already booked or no longer is looking for a load. So I think that really, speaks to some of the inefficiencies that and some of the challenges. So I think what you end up seeing is sometimes you go into these brokerages and you see, tables full of people, manning phone calls and with two monitors, and they're sending emails and they're texting and they're phone call. I mean, it's a pretty impressive sight to see, but to your point, sometimes you kind of have to scratch your head and say, it's got to be a more efficient way than just throwing more bodies and making more phone calls, at it, because I think, ultimately that's going to be a costly proposition, particularly when you're working on margin. So that cost can really come back to bite you. So you mentioned, load boards. I mean, obviously over the years, we've seen technology, start to play a role here with freight matching. Again, load boards. I think more recently you've seen some of these, Uber for freight, startups that are looking to disrupt, the industry. I mean, how are these technologies helping? Where are they falling short? I mean, what are some of the limitations to these, technologies that have come about, over the years?
You're right. There's a huge influx of new ideas, new technology companies, primarily with the idea of disrupting the space. So for any industry or for any player to disrupt a particular industry, two things we need. One, we need a group of people with new ideas, thinking outside the box, in most cases trying to improve the existing processes or business values. The second thing is we also need technology that's easy to adopt and which enhances the value. So these two combination will drive something in this direction. And so most of the companies, let's we call them as Uber-like, Uber brand being such a big popular thing nowadays. What they're trying to do is get in the space and, more importantly, try to disengage brokers. Now, if you peel that layer to look at, can the brokers be disengaged easily? From outside, it looks like brokers can be disengaged. But if you look at closely, brokers have very high business acumen. They have strong relationships with shippers. They have strong relationships with carriers. And they add a lot of value in vetting out these carriers in the process to make sure a particular load is delivered on time. So when we are ordering something online, We expect it to be delivered in 2 days. There's a lot that goes behind scenes for that package to arrive at our doorsteps, and oftentimes it is these brokers that bring that value. So it's not very easy to disengage them. And in my opinion and in our opinion at Trucker Tools is that disengaging brokers is more harmful than any value that we add to the supply chain in current conditions. A better approach will be taking the best of all worlds. And one thing we should look at is, instead of disengaging brokers, what can we do to enable them to improve their efficiency? What else can we do to rely on their existing relationships and business acumen that they bring to the table? Obviously, the simple things are improve how eliminate all the data issues or stale data in the market. We can convert the one load wonders into repeat business for the brokers and hence reduce the cost of operations. And more importantly, it requires a platform where there is a healthy adoption from not only just the brokers, but the segment of carriers, especially that 80% of freight that's being moved by these small carriers, 20 trucks or less, a healthy adoption of that community. Now, since transportation has always been a relationship-based industry, meaning shippers would not give freight to everyone that comes along their way. They would only give it their freight to someone that they believe in. And so this platform that we are thinking about should really embrace and protect those relationships. And you could only do it in a very confidential, private, secure network.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, today on Talking Logistics, I published a post titled "Disrupting Logistics Ain't Easy," right? Because you've seen, so many folks trying to disrupt the industry and disintermediate, folks. And the reality is, just to echo some of the points you brought up, is that, in order to really do that, I mean, you really have to take into account the fact that there's existing relationships that are there that are not easy to, displace with just the, technology. Brokers do provide a lot of value beyond just, securing that load in terms of finding making sure that the carriers are approved and making sure that the quality is there in terms of meeting those on-time commitments. And you mentioned partial shipments, getting there on 2 days. Obviously, on the B2B side, you've got things like on time in full that are putting more pressure on shippers and consignees to make sure that that quality is there as well. And that's a big part, where the retailers, where the brokers, play a role in that as well. So, let's talk now about, I think you started talking a little bit about this already. I mean, even more recently, we've seen, a lot of interest and demand for real-time freight visibility, solutions, that are enabled by, smartphones and mobile apps and other, GPS enabled, devices. And a lot of these solutions have been used currently to kind of track the status of a shipment and load, from the point of pickup all the way to final delivery, be able to predict estimated times of arrivals and communicate that and so forth. But can these solutions be used, to enable freight matching? How would that work?
What you said is absolutely right. Visibility has taken the front seat in the last few years. Everybody talks about visibility. So in my conversations with people, what I have noticed is visibility is actually used in a very broad scope, both in terms of visibility, like you mentioned, from point A to point B, from the time the load has been picked up to the point the load has been delivered, having the real-time visibility of the freight. And people also use the visibility in the context of visibility of when the trucks are available. Now, these two are two distinct things. I'm glad that you're connecting these two into, you're connecting the dots here. So let's look at the first part. Like you said, there are different solutions. Some of them use the GPS on the cell phone or the smartphone. Some of them do cell phone triangulation and everything in between. And most of the solutions are thriving to get to real time. Most of them are still lacking. So when I say real time, giving an update of where the freight is every 5 minutes to where the freight was 4 hours ago. Again, one drives us back into the stale information era. The other one drives into accurate information. So we do need that accurate information more than that stale information. No. The second part is, just because you know where the truck is now doesn't necessarily lead into where the truck is available next. So the second part is even more critical for us to reduce the cost of transportation. In order to reach to the second part, what you would need is a platform where you not only know where the truck is now, but in confidence you can say this truck is going to be available in future. So you need a mobile, a dynamic mobile platform where you can constantly check when these trucks are available in future. So this is when I'm going to just segue back into what we have done at Trucker Tools. So we built the whole Trucker Tools platform with the app being at the middle. So the original app, it's all driver focused, and it focuses on everything the driver needs on the road, whether it's real-time fuel prices, the service centers, truck washes, anything they need, and hence built a community that's primarily small carriers and owner operators. So in addition to providing these services, we also look at the GPS on the smartphone and use it to track the freight from point A to point B. Now that kind of helps us generate that real-time location of where the truck is. We took that to the next level with our smart capacity. So smart capacity is bringing all these components together in order to not only look at where the truck is, but look into the future to see where the truck is available. And that is taking the transformation of the freight matching now. So what it does is it basically looks at where these trucks are going to be available in future, and based on their lane preference and everything, generate a complex system where that's basically simple to use for the brokers to move their freight.
So it sounds like, I guess to paraphrase a little bit, I think where these solutions are kind of the next evolution of this is now, moving beyond just visibility of, where's the truck, where's the freight from origin to destination. Now it's really evolving toward more from a capacity focused standpoint in terms of having forward-looking capacity, visibility to forward-looking capacity, know where capacity is going to be in 2 days time, 3 days time, to be able to do that freight matching, much sooner and more efficiently than has happened in the past. And certainly I think, to your point in your experience, things like, GPS enabled devices and mobile apps are kind of some of the technology that have made this possible. But what are some of the other, critical building blocks, to make this work?
The other critical ones are primarily the critical mass of carriers. So you could build the best mousetrap, but if it doesn't have the critical mass, people won't use it. Especially in this case, anytime you're talking about a marketplace, having the critical mass is important. The very first question anyone will ever ask you is, how many carriers do you have on your platform? That's the critical mass. And more importantly, when we talk about critical mass in the right segment is very important. You want that the majority of the carriers that move the loads, the small carriers to owner operator segment, to be on this platform. So that's one of the things. The second thing is a platform should have all the confidentialities in place, privacies. Why is this important is it is a relationship platform and everybody wants to protect their information. If you put a marketplace, we already have public marketplace such as load ports, and we have seen what happens with those. Everybody is gun shy to put their information out, or they're not free to conduct a business. It's almost like you want these private meeting rooms. Then the third and more important thing is ease of use. Ease of use, where a broker or a carrier could easily adapt to the platform and apply their business rules, where they don't have to tweak their own existing business. So you want to be able to build a platform that takes into consideration that each and every broker is different, each and every shipper is different, carrier is different. They would like to do their business slightly different, but yet they can bring these customizations of their business processes into one platform with ease.
That last point, the point about confidentiality, that's something that I've heard a lot from the brokers, right? Because they were, as we've talked about, right, they work hard to develop those carrier relationships and to get that capacity and everything else, and they don't want a competitor or another broker to, so there's a lot of considerations there in terms of making sure you've got the right security and the right visibility of who can see what and all that, and be able to have that infrastructure in place. And I think the second point, kind of related to that, I think that's important that you mentioned, is the fact to have business rules in place in terms of depending on the specifics of each carrier or each broker, they're going to want to enable different levels of visibility or different constraints and things like that, and being able to let people on the community be able to define those, I think is important. I think obviously, I think there's got to be, from the matching standpoint, I would assume there's got to be some level of, I want to call it machine learning or artificial intelligence as well, right? With kind of the matching component to it, as well as the predictive component to it.
You're absolutely right. And so when we talk about a matching algorithm, all these things are very, very critical. The crux of matching is, again, how do you make the matching easy? So let's take a parallel, right? We still remember the days when internet was very in its infant state and Google came by. Before Google, the search engine was really inefficient. And at best, you could stumble upon what you're looking for by chance, not with confidence. When Google came by, what they did was they basically took the search engine and transformed that algorithm. They looked into a lot of parameters to make sure that when you go to Google and search for something, the top 3 links are the best that you would ever have to look at. You never have to go beyond that. So any search algorithm should have those. So for example, with our smart capacity, what we did was we took into factor what are the various things that the matching algorithm should have, whether it's lane preferences, predictive timing, accurate matching, removing the dead head. These are all the obvious things that people are still calculating manually. So we took all of those factors into a complex algorithm, which is very similar to what you and I could call it as a Google algorithm, right? When you search for available truck capacity and smart capacity, you get all the available truck capacity. You would never have to go be down more than 3 or 4 from the top. And that's because these are the best matches. And, I would go back to one of the existing problems with the matching algorithms nowadays. With poorly laid out the matching algorithms, if you're calling a carrier, the carrier is not available. You're investing time while some other broker is actually talking to a right or available carrier. So thus you're always stuck behind the 8 ball. So if you turn this around, if you could go directly to those that are the best matches for you quickly, it's not just saving the number of calls, but saving the time it takes overall. Now, one other cost that drives brokerages nowadays is the longer you wait to cover a load, the cost of the transportation goes up. So if you could match a load 3 days, 4 days into future now, it reduces your cost of transportation, as opposed to if you're only matching a load that needs to be picked up tomorrow morning, where you would have to pay a premium. So like you said, the complex algorithms are very, very important. And there comes a point where it's very difficult for humans to make these things. So we let the machines do what they do the best.
Right. I assume, the more, the more carriers and the more, capacity you have on the network, the more difficult it becomes to do it on a spreadsheet, if you will, or do it manually. You really need some of these algorithms to really analyze that. Now, there's the carriers and the drivers and a part of the network, right? That's the capacity side of the equation. What about the load information side? I mean, how is that being, fed into the system? Is there integrations that are involved here with like broker systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the very nature of supply chain, right, we are not sitting in an isolation. Everybody thinks we are in an isolation, but we are not, right? There are these transportation management systems that have all the freight, and before that there is shipper system that comes and everything, right? So what we do is we are integrated with ATMS software, and that feeds all the available loads into our system. And in real time, these available loads are shown on a map with all the available freight that's within the qualified network of carriers for that particular broker, and also additional carriers that expressed interest to work with this carrier, with this broker, all in one simple format. Now, this format not only just integrates with their existing TMS, but also integrates with other sources of capacity. Let's say if they have spreadsheets, emails, or their own trucks on a different platform, that's also integrated into one. So it's not only providing accurate information, but aggregating that information.
Great, great. So, I mean, can you share with us, any examples of, kind of freight matching and this freight matching approach in practice? I mean, what have been some of the results or benefits, the early adopters of this have achieved so far?
So we since we launched Smart Capacity at the end of the last year, we have built a strong critical mass of both brokers and drivers. And some of the early customers that came on board, we have had a very good success rate with them. I could share with you some of the examples here. So one in particular, we have done a case study is with Triple T Transport. And what they have done is when they came on board, they have primary goals to achieve. The first goal is they want to proactively start matching loads, not just for today and tomorrow, but into the future, 3 days into the future. And then the second goal that they wanted to achieve is move some of their one-off carriers or one-load wonders into irregular carriers. That's the second thing that they wanted to do. The third one that they want to do is identify regions where they have more capacity and not enough freight. And then finally, find more capacity in addition to what they have. So I'll go through each one of these cases. The first part, so when they came on board, they were able to identify capacity, available truck capacity, days in advance, and book loads and move that freight. This pretty much reduces the stress, the cost of a brokerage, just that point alone. Now, the second thing that they were able to do is identify all these carriers that they are unable to reconnect with, or the one-load wonders, and started moving them into repeat business from them. And this has been, all these points, by the way, are not just with one customer. These are very consistent with almost all our customers. The third one is when you have real-time visibility of all the capacity that you can access, that gives you the power to see which areas you don't have enough freight. And so in one particular example with a customer, they are able to secure freight more than a week in advance if they don't have, secure capacity week in advance where they don't have freight, and go to a shipper to get freight and put it on that truck. So this is where you're gaining new business, not just moving your business efficiently. And again, putting the first pieces first, such as having that app with all the owner-operators and small carriers under one platform, helps us bring additional truck capacity to all these customers.
I love that example of being able to see where you've got, access to capacity, but perhaps not enough loads. I mean, and create really new business opportunities to then be able to go in advance to shippers that you have relationships with and say, hey, we've got some, some capacity here, and, be able to, uplift, the revenue side of the equation there. So that's something I hadn't, thought about. We're running, short on time here. So I just got a couple of quick questions here. I mean, what's next when it comes to, enabling, smarter approaches to, freight matching? I mean, what are some capabilities that are on the horizon?
We're just starting off now. In my opinion, I think this is you can call it a perfect storm for innovation. We've just started transforming this industry. So if you look at just the brokerages, right? Because brokers are our primary customers, that's where we focus. While they add a lot of value, most of the brokers, the cost of transaction is over $150 per load. That's a pretty high cost. And a majority of that is going in the freight matching and covering the freight. But also there are a lot of steps that could be automated in that process, whether it's back office or whole complete transaction. So there are many areas where we can improve. The second thing is, as I mentioned earlier with some of our customers, we are transforming the supply chain by not looking at today and tomorrow, but looking a week into the future. Now, this opens up opportunities such as we could eventually go to a particular shipper and a broker who could go to their shipper and say, instead of moving your freight today, if you move it tomorrow, you could reduce the cost of operations. So that will start really impacting the supply chain, because now we are moving pieces that are significantly going to reduce the cost. I think the precursor for that is coming through. I would still use the example of Amazon. When you go and buy something on Amazon, they'll tell you if you don't need it to be shipped tomorrow, if you could wait for 4 days, we could give you some credits. So they are also pushing the customer to start saying, what you need right now, let's pay high dollar value. What you don't need, let's move it down. So we are kind of adjusting the cost of supply chain, thus reducing the cost of supply chain. And that's the beginning of it. Now, on the driver side, there is a lot of value we still haven't touched. We started improving the business for small carriers. And with every new technology innovation that comes by, we are leveling the field for a little guy with a big corporation. And over a period of time, that leveling starts taking very closer matching. So the future is really bright.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think from my perspective, I think when you combine, we talk about data, right, and having that real time, more accurate data and visibility to that data, and when you couple that with forward visibility and predictive visibility, I think that some of the examples you gave there, kind of shows that it opens the door to a lot of new ways to improve, the way that the different stakeholders, shippers, carriers, brokers, drivers, all operate in this environment. Prasad, just as a way to wrap up, I mean, if I'm a broker or a 3PL, I mean, what questions, should I ask, myself to assess whether my current approach to freight matching is, as smart and efficient as possible?
That's a good way to, I think about, right? If I'm a broker today, the biggest question I should ask myself is, am I doing enough to really improve efficiency in my operations? Because the forces are very tight. Like you mentioned earlier, there is a huge capacity crunch, and the cost of transportation is increasing, but the top line, the revenue that we get from transportation is not increasing at the same pace. So our margins are going to shrink as a broker. So efficiency is the key word here. But in order to get the efficiency, am I using the right levers? So am I asking my people to make, instead of 150 calls, 200 calls a day? Or am I transforming that by using more accurate data, not fight with a lot of stale data, right? That will transform, that will leapfrog other brokers, right? The second thing is, I'll go back to that one load wonders. Am I putting more blood to fight hemorrhage, or am I really addressing that problem, right? That's a critical thing. We'll always have that natural tendencies to lean to, let's do what we do a little better, versus let's transform into a next level. Um, I think the time is right for most of the brokers today. If I'm a broker today, I want to take a chance on, let's transform my processes, not just try to do a little better, because there is a glass ceiling on that little better. Then the third and most important thing is, growth is the essence. Am I trying to keep my business at the same level as I have today, or am I thinking about aggressively growing? When I grow the business, that really gives me a strong footing in the space, as opposed to try to hold my ground. In order to grow, I should be free to thinking away from, I need to move my 2,000 loads or 3,000 loads per month the same rate. I should be thinking about moving 10,000 loads, 20,000 loads. What would it get me to get to that level? Again, use technology as much as possible. Millennials have already started entering the marketplace. They're very comfortable with technology. And that's a very good sign. When a brokerage adopts to new technology, there is less of a resistance from this group of employees. Let them be the champions and in some way trailblazers for the company to get to that next level.
Well, a lot of great words of advice there, and food for thought. And like I always say at the end of all our episodes, Prasad, we only managed to scratch the surface of these topics, but I think we covered a lot of ground today. You provided some great insights in terms of kind of the challenges that brokers face, particularly on the efficiency side, and kind of how some of these newer technologies are helping to address that, and how we're really at the early stages here of really seeing some great opportunities to take a much smarter and more efficient approach to freight matching. So Prasad, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Adrian.
And I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Trucker Tools website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Prasad, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.